Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of death metal, checking out some Immolation from, I was going to say a couple years ago, 10 years ago, a whole decade now. I know some people asked for Immolation in the comments. I don't remember if this was necessarily a song that was requested by them, but it's what we have rolling for us today. We're going to be looking at the track Indoctrinate, which comes off of I don't know. It does not list the album. Come on, Nuclear Blast Records. How are you going to sell me on an album? You don't tell me what album I need to be looking at. Alright. Let's dive into this, see what's going on with Immolation. Wow. Kingdom of Conspiracy, there we go. Yeah, so we've had a 4/4 and a 3/4. They consistently work with 2-bar riffs. That riff underneath the growling is slightly different than the riff that they play when he's not growling. Unlike this section, which uses the exact same riff for both sections. Yeah, they really do not care much for consistency of ideas. Interesting solo too, it just sort of is. Yeah, so we're in a very fast 4/4 here, but we explore a lot of groupings of 3 at the beginning, which make the end of the phrase odd. Feel odd anyways. What? Oh man. Now this. Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted last time. Okay, maybe not that. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in here. But on the whole, I'm gonna attempt to come at this from arm's length appreciation because for the most part I don't think I was a big fan of this. Every time I found something I enjoyed, they found a way to make me unenjoy it. That's not a word. They removed my joy. Man. I will say they write good riffs. As I've said earlier this week, I'm not really a riff kind of person, but the riffs here are they're fine. They got a nice groove to a lot of them. They have movement that's neat. I wish they would move more. Like even that boom bum 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 bum. We hear that so often, right? And it has this cool like bum 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 bum. It's almost like rising thirds where we start at one note, we rise above and we come back to a middle point, and then we rise above and we come back to a middle point. But like if we had taken that, we play it twice, shift it up a third, play it twice there, shift it up to the fifth and play it twice there. I don't know if necessarily that rising action would fit, but I'm just saying you can copy paste this one idea you've written and just start on a different note, and you can find movement within the riff itself without just playing that same riff over and over and over and over, but without having to write something brand new. That's the kind of variation on the riff I would really like to hear. But the other thing that stands out to me also is that every single riff in here, a vast majority of the riffs in here, are 2-bar ideas. Bum ba ba bum 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 bum. Oh, wait, no, that's 3. Bum ba ba bum 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 ba ba bum 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 bum. You get 2 groups of the 3. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. And so they're short ideas played over and over and over with no variation. The contrast comes when that idea is over. When we leave the verse and we go to the next riff, that is the only time you get any contrast, is when a new riff comes in. Now, they do have one moment I really like during the verse, is that the riff that they play when the growls are going on and the riff that they play when there are no growls are slightly different. It's just enough for it to feel like there's enough change that I'm continuing to stay interested. But just after this, I don't know if it's the post verse or if it is the chorus or if it's a pre-chorus. I don't really know. It's really difficult for me to feel anything other than they're playing riffs and the solo. The solos are very distinct from the rest of their writing, but the rest of their writing just kind of melds together for me into a very samey pot of soup, and it's hard for me to differentiate between what would be a verse and what would be a chorus. But anyways, after we get out of this part though, they play the same riff, whether he's growling or not. And this part is just over and over and over and over. And they do harmonize it sometimes, but that just isn't enough of a change for me personally. Some people, I'm sure they really love this, right? It's not that this is bad music, right? I want to make that very clear. It just isn't my cup of tea. It's it, I don't want to put this music down, okay? So bear with me if this feels like an insult, but it feels like stupid fun. All right, I like stupid fun films. I like stupid fun video games. Music, I think my idea of stupid fun is different than this, but this might be someone's definition of stupid fun. It's just good, turn your brain off and enjoy it music, right? And for some people, all they need is one really tasty riff and some dude growling over it with a nice drum beat in the background, and they're good for 5 minutes on that. And more power to them. I don't want anyone to walk away from this thinking I'm trashing it, but it just isn't my cup of tea, and this is why. It's a lot of short ideas that get played repeatedly and without any melody, right? The riff is semi melodic, but we don't have a melody on top of it. The guitar solos bring in a melodic edge when they are present, but they are far and few between. They're still more than I would have expected, but they're rather short. And so they take up a small part of the entire runtime. And the vocals, which would normally be your melodic instrument, are textural in this track. There just really isn't a strong sense of melody at all. And once again, that might be something somebody really loves. Great. Not for me though. But it is something that builds this specific vibe. I don't know that melody would improve this overall. It would make it so that I have something to pay attention to while I'm listening to the track, especially in this setting, analytically, thinking about every note rather than just absorbing it in a more casual setting. But I don't know that it would make the song better. It would just make it more enjoyable to me in this specific, first time listen. So, yeah, I think that's a majority of my criticisms on this. And they're not really criticisms against the art. It's just that it's not something I would want to listen to, and this is why. It's my opinion about it. I think criticism as a term kind of carries that it's fact. Especially when we talk about constructive criticism, this is a way to make it better. And that's not usually where I'm coming at it. I do have objective takes, but at least on this time specifically, it's primarily a subjective component. I like the solos on paper. Having so many short solos, especially as a melodic break from a purely textural and atmospheric style of writing, is really cool. These solos are bizarre though. Just to put this in perspective, the solos themselves are not that much longer than the riffs. The riffs make sense. They don't really cycle in on themselves exceptionally well. They sort of just stop and then begin again. It's not a loop that perfectly fits, but it fits enough to have a continuous type of momentum to it. The riffs make sense. They're not obtuse to listen to. The guitar solos are, though, entirely obtuse. Rhythmically, they seem to change and go in different. It's like taking a very sharp 90-degree turn while you're just power walking forward, and it's really difficult for anyone following you to make that exact thing because they're not expecting it. And that's what the music does with its rhythm, or sorry, that's what the solos do with their rhythm constantly. But there's also a really interesting harmonic choice going on here as well that I don't think fits the mood, but is intriguing. Again, I don't think it's a bad choice with the notes that they chose. They just don't fit the mood and are not what I would choose to go with given what kind of style and sound they've solidified as what the song is about. They feel very unorthodox given everything else going on. And for a song that isn't proggy, they're not intentionally going out of their way to choose spicy ideas. It's interesting that for these little 10-second segments, they're like, let's throw in all the spice. This is that bite of pasta that you get where like all the spices clump together and you don't realize it and you eat it and you're like, this is everything and it's too much, and then your next bite is like just pasta and you're like, oh, this is kind of bland. That's kind of how the song goes. You get very traditional death metal throughout all of it, and then like this super spicy, unorthodox harmonic writing, and then back to very standard metal. And so again, it's not a bad idea. It's just very unusual and unexpected, and in a way that, at least to me, doesn't complement the song itself. But you know what? They did it, and I'm talking about it, and I can't help but think about it. It is the highlight of the song to me, even if I don't understand what it's doing. Even if it feels frictional, I can't get it out of my head that the guitars continue to do these wild rhythmic and melodic ideas. The solos sound like they're taken from a completely different track and put in here. And it's just, it blows my mind. It's the bizarrest the bizarrest direction to go for the solos in this track. And just on that alone, it's going to be something I remember about it. Everything else it's death metal. I don't think there's anything in here that's going to stick with me or that I'm going to remember particularly about it. I'm going to remember that Immolation is their death metal. They're trudging, they're heavy, simple riffs, um, but they also have wild solos. Like that is a detail I'm not going to be able to forget about them. But then, like, the strangerest thing happened. Stick with my wild vocabulary for a second. The very last guitar solo, well, let me just take it a step previous to this. With like 50 seconds to go, they introduce a completely brand new section, a completely brand new riff, vibe, atmosphere, everything. What? Then they put a guitar solo on top of it, and it is melodic, it makes sense, it has flow and direction and pacing. It is wonderful, and then it stops abruptly right as it points towards the next idea. What? Huh? I finally get what I ask for, and they just stop it. It's not like it resolves itself. The notes say, hey, I'm going over here, and then the guitar just stops playing. It's not the end of an idea, it's an introduction to the next, and they just didn't play what comes next. It's a monkey paws wish. I got a solo I really liked out of them that went in places that made sense to me, and then they just cut it short in the middle of it. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on with this solo, what's going on with this whole section. Why did we introduce something brand new with so little time left? There's not going to be any time to develop it. And that's when I remember death metal isn't about development, it's just about the here and now, and I've got to remember that. Like I said, for people who enjoy this music, it's just stupid fun music. You get in, the noise is right, the sound is right, you bang your head, and you just turn your brain off and enjoy the vibes. And so they don't need to develop it, it just needs to exist, as most of the rest of this track has. I'm like, okay, whatever. And then we bring back some old lyrics on top of this new section, and they replace the guitar. So I'm like, okay, it's a bit of an abrupt stop on this solo I was enjoying, but the vocals are here. They just don't want to play both simultaneously. And then they play both simultaneously. The guitar comes in under the vocals, and it brings back that solo line for line, note for note. It is not a solo anymore. It's now a melodic riff that's being repeated, a motif that we're experiencing again in a new context. And at the end of it, it doesn't end abruptly at that point. It continues on into the next section, which is revisiting one of our earlier ones, but this time with one of those really strange avant-garde style solos on top of it. And I just have I don't and I think that's why I'm coming away from this track a bit more positive than I would normally. The parts of it that don't really gel with me because they're traditional death metal still don't really gel with me much. I understand why people listen to it. It's just not my jam. but they're necessary in order for everything else that caught my attention to have caught my attention. If everything is experimental, nothing is experimental. So you give me a bass line and you make it not only just the bass line of the song, but utilizing the tropes of the genre. We come in with this track, I'm like, yeah, this is what I expect death metal to be. So my expectations are right here where death metal is. And every once in a while, you just tease something really off kilter, way out, way from death metal. I'm like, well, that was strange. Then we get back into it, I forget about it. And we do it again. I'm like, oh, no, I'm seeing a pattern here. But then we get back into the death metal and I forget about it. And then we do something very odd. I'm like, wait a second, this is, and then you're just throwing things at me rapid fire. Now I have so many questions about what's going on. And I would not have had this experience if we started out with a more experimental or avant-garde approach to it. And so I'm ending this reaction with a lot of negativity. Again, this is still not a song I would listen to on my own, but I'm intrigued by it. This isn't a band that just stumbled on some bad solos. Everything was meticulously placed. The oddities of the solo weren't bad or wrong. They were designed to create interest. And by the end of the song, I have so many questions about the creation process itself that I can't help but to think Immolation is geniuses at having somebody listen to their music and want to listen to more afterwards, regardless of if they enjoyed it or not. And now I have to check out more Immolation, even though halfway through the song, I didn't. That's genius. So yeah, what sounded like criticism actually ended up being praise. Everything I didn't like about this is what's going to keep me around. Maybe not for the long haul. Maybe I listen to the rest of the album and I'm like, yeah, that's some weird stuff and I've had my fill. But I'm not done with one song. And honestly, that's one of the best things you can do in the world of art is for you to take an audience member and have them want to explore more of your art. Yeah, I come away from this one with a bit of positivity on it. Let me hit some lyrics, see what's going on there. I picked up a few of them because, they're written on a screen. There's no way I could have missed all of them. I have an idea of what's going on, but I want to read all of them first before we dive into dissecting them. And yeah, you get what it says on the front of the tin. The song's called Indoctrinate. One of the first words that we saw on the lyric video was ready the youth for this culture of madness. It is a song about indoctrinating the young before they know that they're being indoctrinated. It works well in a lot of cultures, places, religions. You put ideas in a child's head before they have a sense of things, and they become the sense that everything's kind of based around. It's really hard to break out of it. I say from experience. Some might take offense to this, but I've been indoctrinated with Christian teachings. It's really hard to break out of that idea. There are still times where a little bit of that seeps into my thought process. But that's what it's about. It's about understanding that kids are malleable, that their brains are moldable. And as it says, catch them when they're young, embed your venomous stinger, this hidden abscessed splinter leaking deep inside of them. Flowing through callous minds, a soothing toxin of promises, altering their thoughts, infecting those within their reach. Make them see what you see, make them be what you are. Indoctrination of the young ensures your law will always thrive. Now, that word law changes throughout the track. At the beginning, it's your cause always thrives. In the middle, it's your law always thrives. And in our very last line, it's to ensure your rule will always thrive. It's the growth of power. As long as you can convince people, and people are easily convinced at an early age when you can build their identity around your truths, you can continue to gain and hold power. That is what the song is about. And it plays a little bit into the sadness of all of this. It's not just about calling it out. At the end, it says it's the sadness of wasted life and silenced dreams. The sorrow of these unwary victims witness the loss of all identity. These are people who never got to become who they were destined to be, cut off by a fellow human utilizing them for their own gains. If I had one criticism, which I do with this track, it's that it doesn't really point towards anything specific. Anybody can use this as a song to say the indoctrination of the youth is bad, and that group of people is who the song is about. Because I think, generally speaking, especially if you're going to be blind to your own usages of this, it's really easy for everyone to say that indoctrination of the youth is bad. Some groups of people will say that while indoctrinating the youth and turning a blind eye to that, or saying that it's not actually indoctrination because of some other thing that's going on. We're just telling them the truth, that line. But the fact that no one in specific is called out in this track means it can be applied to everyone. But I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. As I've said in the past, if your stance that you make in your art can be utilized by people on two polar opposite sides of an opinion, you haven't really said anything. But I don't think this song is specifically trying to make a stand against any particular group of people. But it is. It talks about a group that is vying for power. Not only just any power, but a power that creates madness through culture. This is directed at something in particular, but they don't say what it is. And so through that, even the people they might be singing about could see this as a song that speaks to them. They don't like the indoctrination they see in the world, because the indoctrination is just people saying, hey, don't do what that group's doing. It's not really indoctrination, it's just working against what they're trying to. But they don't see it that way, and the song doesn't explicitly call it out. So like I said, I don't know that that's necessarily a negative, but it is something that I wish they had taken that extra step further on. It feels like it's missing some teeth. It just doesn't have the bite it should. It's just calling out something that and yeah, like everyone's gonna, indoctrination's bad. I don't think anyone's gonna say otherwise, at least not vocally. I don't know. Otherwise, though, I think it's a solid piece lyrically. I don't really see how it lines up with the music, and it just makes me question some of the musical decisions even more. But yeah, it's a solid song from start to finish. Not as I said, not really my cup of tea, but I totally understand why people enjoy it. I do. Those are my thoughts on Immolation's Indoctrinate. Let me know what you thought of this track. Anything that stood out to you, anything that you would like to expand upon what I said, or correct me on, or maybe just provide your own opinions and perspectives on. put all that stuff down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps this one up. We do have one more video coming out today. Be sure to check that out. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. It's a Saturday, so we're going to check out a full album. Be prepared for that. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.